So I don't know if you guys saw this over the weekend, but there was hundreds of people reporting they saw a floating city in the skies above China. It was on Chinese news stations, and there's even a clip of it. And it's been explained away as an optical illusion in the comments sections of these YouTube videos that in China the scientists have explained it, and it has to do with the way that cold, dense air at the surface bends light reflected from a distant object, otherwise known as a fata morgana. Looks something like this. Although, in my opinion, this video, it looks a little bit high off the ground for that to be the case, but that's what they're claiming. But there have been other sightings of these cities appearing in the sky that cannot be so easily explained away. And I don't know if you guys remember back in 2012 when an entire African village saw what appeared to be a city floating in a cloud over their village. And the way they described it was beautiful tall buildings inside of it with tarred roads and cars. It was like a flying city, and from it I could hear the sound of machines making noise just as you would hear at a Shaka cement factory. Obviously that wasn't a reflection of their city because they don't have tall buildings, they don't have tarred roads, so either all of these people were on crack and they hallucinated this, or somebody's playing with their toys over an area where they know people aren't going to have cell phones and whip out their iPhone and be able to film it. And I know some people have said it, and it was the first thing I thought of too, Project Bluebeam. There are people that claim that Bluebeam was never really an actual thing the government ever considered, that it was entirely made up. And I just want to point out to you that it's not. I actually came across this article in unrelated research, and it turns out they're talking basically about Bluebeam in here. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's an article from the Washington Post from 1999 called "When Seeing and Hearing Isn't Believing." And they're talking about PSYOPs in here and the different things they came up with. You get to this part where it says, Allah on the holodeck. It talks about all these PSYOPs that the Pentagon was planning against the Iraqis after the invasion of Kuwait in 1990. And one of the things they came up with was, what if the U.S. projected a holographic image of Allah floating over Baghdad, urging the Iraqi people and army to rise up against Saddam? A senior Air Force officer asked in 1990. According to a military physicist who was given the task of looking into this idea, the feasibility had been established of projecting large three-dimensional objects that appear to float in the air. But could they do it over Iraq? And it says that they calculated that projecting such a hologram over Baghdad several hundred feet would take a mirror more than a mile square in space, as well as huge projectors and power sources. And they weren't sure what Allah looked like. But then it goes on to say that the Gulf War hologram story might be dismissed were it not the case that Washington Post had learned a super secret program was established in 1994 to pursue the very technology for PSYOPs application. The holographic projector is described in a classified Air Force document as a system to project information power from space for special operations deception missions. So they were going to do it. They were looking into it. And that's back in 94. So in 90 they came up with the idea, started looking into it. In 94 they were pursuing it. Who knows what they actually have today? But they probably wouldn't test it here where every other person and their grandma has an iPhone. They're going to test it in places like in Africa, in some village where they're banking on the fact that the people aren't going to have iPhones. Not only that, but I just want to point out really quick, and by now you're probably figuring out that this mysterious sighting in China just gave me an excuse to talk about this article. But they also had a technology that takes a 10-minute digital recording of someone's voice and is able to clone their speech patterns in order to develop an accurate facsimile. So Los Alamos National Laboratory, they were coming up with that back in the 90s. Meaning all of these people today, for example, who, I don't know, commit crimes because they hear Obama's voice telling them to do it may actually be hearing a psychotronic weapon with Obama's voice, because apparently the PSYOPs team at Los Alamos was coming up with stuff like this back in the 90s. And all it takes is a 10-minute clip of someone's voice. You know, take one of Obama's speeches, 10 minutes, and you can make him say anything and it sounds real. This is the kind of stuff they had like 2 decades ago. Can you imagine the stuff they have today?